So welcome to the Transformative Grant 2022 informational webinar presented by the Campus Coordinating Centers on April 14, 2022. To meet our presenters today, my name is Marcus Stanley. I am the current Director of Programs and Project Officer for the University of Houston Campus Coordinating Center, and I will turn it over to my colleagues for them to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deasia Lee. I am the Compass Program Manager with the Southern AIDS Coalition.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christopher Matthews. I am the Capacity Building Manager for the Emory Campus Coordinating Center.
Hello, everyone. I am Allison Matthews. I am the Executive Director of the Faith Coordinating Center at Wake Forest University.
So let's talk about a little bit what we're here in this room for today. And today we're going to give an overview of the Compass Initiative and the funding opportunities, particularly paying focus and attention on the Transformative Grant. Talk a little bit about our programmatic areas and what we'll be looking for specifically in the Transformative Grant as it relates to requirement, submission and review process, as well as important dates. You all also had the opportunity to submit questions beforehand. We will be answering some of those questions at the end of the webinar. As well, if you have any additional questions, please submit those questions in the chat box, and Kia will collect those questions and ensure that those questions are added at the end. As well, you all are welcome to send your questions to our info box at info@gileadcampus.com. So what is the Compass Initiative? The Compass Initiative is a $100 million commitment over 10 years to support organizations that are working to address the HIV epidemic in the South. There are many arms to the Compass Initiative. There's the corporate giving arm, there's independent medical education grants, as well as the AIDS View Partnership. In addition to that, there's also the Compass Coordinating Centers, which are the 4 centers that are being represented by the presenters on this webinar. Myself representing the University of Houston with our content area wheelhouse of well-being, mental health, and trauma-informed care, as well as substance use and harm reduction and trauma-informed leadership supervision. Our partner, Emory University, is focusing on capacity building and shared knowledge. Our partner SAC are focused on awareness, education, and anti-stigma campaigns. And our partners, Wake Forest University School of Divinity, is focused on faith-based HIV stigma reduction. We'll get a little bit more information about each one of these centers and what we'll be looking for in the grant a little bit later in the presentation. So what's the mission of the Compass Initiative? So guided by our local communities disproportionately affected by HIV in the Southern United States, our coordinating centers are working collaboratively to build the capacity among these organizations, institutions, and entities to reduce HIV in care and advance equities in the Southern United States. So what we're doing is really paying a particular focus on the South and eliminating HIV in the South by building the capacity of organizations to address HIV. And the way that we do this is through our guiding principles. This slide may be a little bit hard to read. This slide is also within the RFP, which I'm encouraging everyone to pay attention to that slide. These are our guiding principles, which is how we work. So we work with the lead of the meaningful involvement of people living with HIV, with the understanding that there could be nothing for them without them. And we pay a particular focus at the intersectionalities, particularly of social justice, with the emphasis on racial justice. And we do this through openness, transparency, and learning, with knowing that these are capacity building grants. And without that transparency of us knowing around what the barriers are, we can't really do our job. And we do this through collaboration and commitment with the organization, not looking on the end of surveillance, but actually trying to build the capacity of the organization. And we do this through a holistic approach, taking all achievements of healing, transformation, and faith celebrations into consideration when we're carrying out these projects. So how do we do this? So we do this by supporting, growing, and working with organizations who are focused on the efforts of eliminating HIV in the Southern community. And we do this by offering collaborative learning opportunities, or shared learning opportunities, which are collaboratives, wherein different organizations come together to learn a topic, a particular topic, to build the capacity around that topic. And we also do this through our grant making programs. We have both formative grants or smaller grants to build capacity, as well as the transformative grant, which we are here to talk about today. So let's jump right on into talking about the transformative grant process. And I will turn this presentation over to my colleague, Chris.
All right, the Emory University Grant Making Initiative, the Emory University or the Rollins School of Public Health within the Emory School, within the Rollins School of Public Health within the Emory University Center is working to create our grant initiative. We're creating long-term sustainability and change in leaders and organizations, and ultimately in communities by supporting capacity building strategies and through technical assistance that strengthen the infrastructure and the support of our HIV and AIDS organizations. All of that is just a very wordy way of saying we support you as you're working to build your infrastructure or develop yourself as a small organization or as an burgeoning organization. Next. The Campus Coordinating Center, or the Emory Campus Coordinating Center, has two focus areas for their particular grant application. The first one is organizational level interventions. This means if you're working on something inside of your organization, whether it be something structural, like building accounting programs or developing something programmatic within your organization, or strengthening the education of members in your organization. All of those things we consider to be organizational level interventions. Our second focus area is the communities or systems level interventions. Community level interventions are typically those that are happening local. You want to decrease the impact of HIV and AIDS in your local community, in areas that surround, or the areas that surround service areas in the surrounding area, or systems level interventions, which seek to impact larger change, or I would like to think of it as global level change. So you want to impact the way HIV systems oppress individuals, or not HIV systems, but systems oppress people who are HIV positive across the globe. So next slide, please. So here we go. Let's drill it down. Focus area 1, organizational level change. We want to strengthen the overall effectiveness of your organization, combining activities and strategies, addressing identified organizational capacity needs, enhancing key systems, protocols, and routines, and enhance the people that give structure to the organization. As I said before, these can be internal systems that need to be addressed, or these can be internal change processes that need to be addressed. Identifying those weaknesses or barriers internally in your organization that stop you from fully functioning well as an organization, or stop your capacity to engage the people that you serve, right? Because we always want to bring it back home at the Emory Campus Coordinating Center to the people that you serve. Next. Organizational interventions could be a strategic plan development, succession plan development, board governance, physical management. It could be developing a communication plan. It could be implementing or updating your program, overhauling your technology. even incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion into the work that you're already doing. So we have 8 core function areas in Emory, and your plans may touch on any of those 8 core functioning areas. Next slide. Then when we reach out to our focus area 2, which is looking to engage either the community level or systems level, or to create community level or systems level impact, the focus has changed a little bit, right? When we talk about community level interventions, we're talking about changing community norms, attitudes, awarenesses, and behaviors. Examples of that look like coalition building, creating an awareness campaign, reduction behaviors amongst high-risk individuals, even challenging things like food insecurities, transportation within a community. As opposed to system level change, where we're hoping to impact the population as a whole, right? We're hoping to address the whole system, to advocate for policy change and affect power structures, support the planning phase of some sort of system or structural level change, or some policy that exists on the local level. So examples of that look like transportation expansion, health equity, housing issues, racial or social issues, but also food insecurity, because we can look at it from a community level. There is not enough access locally for food, or we can look at it as a systems level. The system doesn't allow people to continuously get food or continuously to have access to food. So those are examples of the 2 focus areas. Next slide. What are we looking for? We're looking for proposals that are articulate, and they articulate the need of the priority population with respect to HIV and to the 3 populations that we focus on heavily in our organization. We're hoping that they align with the funding, opportunity, and grants needs. That goes back to you being really diligent about reading the RFP and making sure that the information that you see, you align your proposal with that information. We're looking for realistic budgets and realistic proposals. That means that you're providing us information around how you plan to implement your program, how you're working to pre-implement it, and how you're planning to conclude the program as a whole. We're hoping that aligns with, or your work plan aligns with your budget, that the 2 aren't opposing, that every resource that you've listed in your work plan is also concurrent in your budget. We're looking for you to vet out things like staffing as a resource and what other behind the screen resources you may need to accomplish your work plan. All of those, we're looking for them to be given a time frame, and we're hoping that you show us the outcomes and the outputs from both. And lastly, we're hoping that we see some sustainability in your programs. It wouldn't do our communities any justice if we gave it a program or we implement a program that we couldn't help to sustain long after this funding had departed. Next slide, please. Things to know. Your maximum request is $100,000. There will be evaluation and monitoring of both your program at the Emory Campus Coordinating Center. We have monthly calls, we have quarterly reports, we have evaluation plans that we're constantly monitoring alongside your work plan, and you'll also be asked to deliver a final report at the end of your project. We have coaching that comes with the capacity building or with the project needs, and you'll also have, each project will be assigned the project officer to monitor the life cycle of your project. Funds cannot go to any medical. We don't support any medical programs, so there can't be any testing, there can't be any harm reduction equipment or medical equipment, or we don't support direct provisions of medical personnel. We also don't pay for projects that have already ended, or we don't fund additional items that are already in progress. Everything that we fund has to be connected to the work plan that you submit. Submitted documents are subject to change with assistance from the Emory team upon selection. That means that when we accept your proposal, we are accepting it with the ability to make some changes as needed. We may like the skeleton of your work plan, or we may like the initial thought that you have, but we may ask you to vet that work plan out a little bit more, or we may ask you to add on to it or remove some things if the workload seems a little bit heavy, and we reserve the right to do so at the Emory Compass Coordinating Center. Next slide. Capacity building proposals. Priority will be given to organizations led by and serving marginalized communities. As I said before, we have three populations that we heavily focus on. That's MSM of color, women of color, Latinx, and transgender non-conforming individuals. We also, we don't mind if you include support for staff or consultants in your funding. And actually, a lot of times we will suggest that you do. We will collaborate to develop evaluation plans and revise work plans and budgets as needed. So if your initial plan, if you sent your initial plan and we decided to fund you, we may ask you to go back and make some revisions to your work plan or to your budget. And as I said before, we reserve the right to do so. Grant recipients that choose to hire consultants with the assistance of capacity building efforts are not required to work with our particular consultants. You may stop and ask us if we can provide you with some information to a consultant, and we may do so. You are not forced into that relationship. You may decide to choose another consultant, and you may still use our funds to hire that particular consultant. Next slide, please. And I will turn it over to our partners at the Houston Coordinating Center.
Thank you, Christopher. Hello, everybody. Once again, my name is Marcus Stanley, and I am the Project Officer and Director of Programs at the University of Houston. Sustained Compass Coordinating Center is housed at the University of Houston's Graduate College of Social Work. And we are focused on wellness, trauma and healing, mental health, substance use, and with a particular focus on harm reduction and the opioid usage. And we have a strong recognition and value of the intersectional practices of social and racial justice, MIPA, or the meaningful involvement of people living with HIV and AIDS. We have a strong commitment to collaboration and a commitment with openness and transparency as well. Little shameless plug, we have a Sustain week that is coming up the week of next week of April 18th, where you can learn a little bit about all of the topics that are covered within each and every one of our opportunities that are housed within the University of Houston. In addition, I want to also announce that each day, one participant will be given some sort of prize for attending, FYI. So moving on to talk about the actual transformative grant process. Last year and this year, we have a particular focus on trauma-informed care organizational change. And what that is actions that transform the actual culture, infrastructure, and the internal processes like hiring, training, screening practices, and policies and procedures. And what this will require is intentional commitment, focus, and management to actually carry out this process, because this will actually be a cultural change process. And we have broken this process down into 3 phases: the pre-implementation phase, the implementation phase, and throughout this, we will be talking about, so throughout this engagement, we will talk about sustainability and what that looks like for the organization. So when we talk about trauma-informed care, what we're really talking about are the 6 guiding principles of the trauma-informed approach. These principles are the principles of safety, to include not only physical safety, but to also include like physical space safety as well. So like, what does the things look like within your waiting area? Are there any things that are re-traumatizing within your waiting areas? Are your organizations well lit? What does the physical environment look like? Trustworthiness and transparency. So what does the decision-making processes look like within your organization, and analyzing that? The policies and procedures, does everyone knows how to actually utilize said policies and procedures within the organization, or is power only reserved for those who are in quote unquote management positions? Additionally, we're going to focus on peer support. As you will read in the RFP, one of the actual mandatory things as it relates to this project is to actually develop an advocacy group and to identify 2 people who are living with HIV who will be leading that process, as well as leading this organizational change process with the change team. Collaboration and neutrality is also one of the approaches that we will hone in on, and we will have a particular focus on empowerment, voice, and choice. Additionally, we will also pay particular attention to cultural, historical, and gender issues within organizations, the harm that potentially may be caused, and how to mitigate said harm. So why are we focusing on trauma-informed care organizational change? So for the first 2 to 3 years with this project, we were working with organizations around trauma and actually incorporating trauma-informed projects into the organization. And we're working with the organization and understanding how the organizations work and what the organization's functions need. And through the evaluative process, what we learned is that the landscape of HIV has been pretty stagnant, and that organizations have really lacked the support and resources to engage in structural change to actually end the HIV epidemic. And what has been happening is that the trauma that has been placed upon these organizations has now trickled down to the staff of those organizations, as well as to the communities in which those organizations serve. And what we have realized through this trauma-informed process is that you can't really incorporate a trauma-informed approach program if the organization isn't trauma-informed itself. So that's why we will now be focused on trauma-informed organizational cultural change to improve employee development, employee engagement, employee retention, service user satisfaction, service user engagement, as well as service innovation and enhancement. So what does that look like? This is the particular roadmap, or what you all should expect to go as it relates to the organizational change process. I know it may be a little bit hard to read, so I actually broke that slide down into a few other slides just to take a look. This graph is also within the RFP, so I encourage you all to look over this graph. This is an extensive program. Pretty much 6 months of this program is intensive training to develop that implementation plan. And then the last 12 months will be actually the implementation of said implementation plan. So what are we looking for? We're looking for proposals that center communities of Latinx experience. We're also focusing on organizational change. We're looking at proposals that are guided by the meaningful involvement of people living with HIV, with an integration of racial justice, as well as we're really paying attention to how well the organization actually answered the guiding questions within the RFP. We do have a YouTube channel, and we would encourage you all to look at the YouTube channel, where we have some testimonials from organizations who have actually went through the organizational change process to talk about some of the barriers of the process, some of the facilitators of the process, and just their experience thus far. So some of the key takeaways is that we really believe that organizational change is the key to life-saving transformational change, and that organizational change is not an easy process. However, it's necessary for organizations to grow and succeed. This grant will allow for the organization to reflect, plan, and execute organizational trauma-informed change. And what's really neat about this process is that the organization will not have to go through this process alone. Not only will they have a project officer to assist them, they will also have the sustained trainers and coaches and consultants to assist through this process. Within the RFP, there are tips for successful implementation. I will ask that you all pay very close attention to those successful tips because those are pretty much requirements as relates to the implementation of this process. And I will now turn this over to my colleague, Deasia, to talk about the Southern AIDS Coalition.
Thank you, Marcus. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Deasia Lee, and I am the Compass Program Manager with the Southern AIDS Coalition. The mission of the Southern AIDS Coalition is to reduce HIV-related stigma in the South, and we do this through grant making, training, and leadership development. Our goal is to empower individuals living with and impacted by HIV to reduce HIV-related stigma in their communities. Next slide, please. So SAC is a nonpartisan coalition of government, community, and business leaders working alongside thousands of people living with HIV and their allies to end the HIV epidemic in the South. Next slide, please. So our vision, we envision a better South for people living with HIV, one where every person has access to high quality healthcare and essential support services that are free from stigma and discrimination. We also envision a South where every person understands their risk for HIV transmission, receives routine screening, and has access to a full range of prevention interventions and harm reduction services. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, our mission is to reduce stigma through grant making, training, and leadership development. And this is just a snapshot of some of our Compass programming. So we deliver trainings to individuals and organizations on how to provide culturally appropriate and non-stigmatizing services to marginalized communities. We also have shared learning opportunities where we train people living with HIV in advocacy and facilitation skills where they can go out into their communities to provide HIV education. Lastly, we have 2 grant-making opportunities, our SPARK grants, which are used to fund community-led grassroots HIV education, awareness, and stigma reduction campaigns. And as we are here today, we're here to talk about our Transformative grants, which are used to fund the design, implementation, and evaluation of interventions to reduce HIV-related stigma for people living with HIV. Next. And so we have sort of 2 focus areas for our Transformative grants. The first focuses on creation or adaptation of an intervention. So if there's an intervention that you want to create based on the populations you serve and the needs of your community, you can apply for funding to support that. If there's an existing intervention that is already available and you kind of want to change it or adapt it to fit the community you serve, or if you want to adapt it to specifically focus on HIV-related stigma, we are also accepting applications for that. Next slide. The final focus area is intervention implementation. So if there's an intervention that has already been created or adapted and you want to expand it with new populations or you want to enhance it in some way, we are also accepting applications to fund these type of projects as well. Next slide. And I did just want to explain a little bit what we mean by intervention. So an intervention is a program or strategy that is designed to reduce HIV-related stigma, both internal and external stigma, by having some kind of positive change. So we want to see some change in the knowledge or skills or attitudes of people living with HIV, a positive change in social support for people living with HIV, and changes in environments, policies, and resources for people living with HIV. Next slide, please. Okay. So SAC is planning to award up to $100,000 in direct funds and up to $15,000 in technical assistance. So the award maximum for the Southern AIDS Coalition is $115,000. And we're really looking for applications that are intentional in the application of MIPA principles. So that's the meaningful inclusion of people living with HIV. We're looking for applications that are demonstrative of the applicant's alignment of the Compass guiding principles that Marcus discussed earlier. We're also really prioritizing applications that are located in communities that currently lack stigma reduction resources for people living with HIV, that are led by members of the community and have a board comprised of members of the community. And we're also looking for applications that are clearly defined and developed with appropriate SMART goals and objectives and a really solid evaluation plan. Next slide. And here is a broad overview of our grant program timeline. This is subject to change, but in general, TGP recipients will be required to complete trainings in stigma and cultural humility, evaluation, and program development. And there will also be quarterly reports, check-in calls, and a site visit that will be required for this cohort of SAC TGP recipients. Next slide. All right, I am going to now turn it over to my colleagues at the Wake Forest Coordinating Compass Center.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Allison Matthews. I'm the Executive Director of the Faith Coordinating Center at Wake Forest University. We are, if you could move to the next slide, we are a coordinating center that focuses on storytelling, training, and funding, doing grant making to faith-based organizations and nonprofit organizations that are interested in doing work to address stigma around HIV and faith communities. And so the goals for the work that we are doing is to partner with experts in HIV, faith, stigma, healing, mental health, and music, and to develop social media and communication toolkits for faith communities, and to really use the power of social media and other forms of communication to really address the stigma and educate the larger community about the stigma around HIV and faith communities. So we a lot of times will partner with national media and national artists. For example, we partnered with Lil Nas X this past year to amplify a lot of the work that our funded partners do and to provide opportunities for them to secure additional funding. Lil Nas X actually fundraised $500,000 that went back to some of our funded partners throughout the coordinating centers. And so that's the kind of partnership that we envision with the funded partners that will apply for the work that apply to work with us. Along with the funding that we supply, we require training, and that we provide that training to our funded partners. It would be monthly trainings. Many of the topics are related to updating you on the state of HIV and AIDS and understanding how stigma manifests itself in faith communities, biblical and spiritual training, and community engagement strategies. And so we, of course, you have your funded projects and the things that you will propose, but we're also going to be there to help you expand that work and amplify it and learn new strategies to engage your communities, and hopefully also build partnerships between you and other artists and other funded partners so that you can expand your work and create more sustainability through your work. We are also interested in working with organizations who either have or are helping others establish health ministries. I know there's a new kind of trend of health ministries becoming social justice ministries, or kind of a combination of those. And so we're thinking about that broadly in regards to addressing health issues in faith communities. We are prioritizing funding organizations that are looking for capacity building, who have kind of the skill set to do communications and educational programming around HIV and faith, and or who have programs that are addressing the social determinants of health and through health ministries. So social determinants of health, or maybe your organization provides transportation or housing or food to people living with HIV, or to the larger community who's vulnerable to HIV and may not necessarily have it yet. And so we want to support that kind of work. Next slide. So the Transformative grant in particular is focused on supporting the establishment of infrastructures and programs to enhance employment, education, transportation, housing, financial wellness, and or healthcare for people at risk for and or living with HIV/AIDS in the U.S. South. Our aim is to collaborate with interfaith partners that includes Christian as well as Buddhist, Muslim, traditional African spirituality, etc. We want to create inclusive faith spaces, both virtual and in person, for LGBTQ people and people living with HIV. We want to create opportunities for physical, emotional, financial wellness, educating emerging faith leaders and faith communities on how to impact communities. Next slide. So what makes a strong application? We really, like the other coordinating centers, want you to clearly articulate how your project addresses the needs of people living with or who are impacted by HIV/AIDS, and how you are particularly connected to faith communities and or have a faith-based initiative. That's going to be the thing that really makes your application stand out. We did last year have organizations who applied who didn't, like maybe they were doing the health work or the food-based work, but didn't really make a strong connection to how they were serving people living with HIV, or they didn't make the strong case that they were working with faith-based communities. And so we need to see that, as well as the plan for and the ability to implement a large-scale project. With $100,000, we are looking for organizations that have the ability to reach across the entire state, or who are reaching several dozens or hundreds of faith leaders, or who have kind of that touch point to be able to engage large groups of people online, right? And so you have to make the case that your organization can handle and or can really use the $100,000 in a way that is going to transform your community. Clearly articulate how you will deliver that program. What are the outcomes? What's the plan for implementation? Who are the people in your organization who are going to be committed to doing this work? What's your timeline? What resources are you going to use? Who are your partners that you're in, the organizations that you're going to be working with? So making sure that all of that is clearly laid out. Don't worry about the project being too small. I think sometimes people think $100,000, you need to create this grand project, but we want this to be feasible, and we want it to be something that is supporting your community, but also that has an impact, right? So moving on. So we're looking for innovative approaches to address HIV stigma in faith communities. I think some examples of innovative approaches are a podcast that that reaches several thousand people, or a TV show or radio show. That would be great. We would love to see that. If you're working with churches and faith communities to help set up their health ministries, that would be a fantastic thing for us to see. If you're creating an app, that can then help people living with HIV to experience more mindfulness. If you're doing a documentary that is, highlighting the stories of people living with HIV and their faith communities. If you're working with faith leaders to do something innovative in that way, like really, we want to see that kind of impact. Demonstrating partnerships and impact with multiple organizations and faith communities, be able to hit the ground running, and have a communication strategy. A lot of organizations, I think one of the biggest hurdles that we had this past year was that organizations did not, or the people who received the funding did not have control over the website or the email listserv and the social media. So I would say to have a conversation, if you're working with a larger organization, you're an employee of that organization, to have a conversation with them about being able to have access to those communication channels so that you can also promote your project, your funded project. So that's one thing. Or, we also at the Faith Coordinating Center will be providing some definite technical assistance and capacity building for communications, but understanding that you should also be thinking through and have some type of plan for how you're going to do communications. Yes, next slide. So our funding parameters will be, we will review the proposals and send out a notification by June of 2022 with the idea of the projects starting July 1 and going through December 2023. You will be required to submit quarterly reports. These are the dates: October, January, April, and July 15th, with the final report due on January 15th of 2024. So if you, like the other coordinating centers, if you, we do not fund individuals or general operating funds, endowments, or fundraising events. We don't fund previously implemented projects. So it's not, the idea is not for us to reimburse you for things that you've already done. And if you are a current Transformative grantee that is currently receiving Transformative grant funding from another coordinating center, you cannot apply for a Transformative grant through us. Next slide. So this is kind of the timeline that I mentioned prior on the previous slide, and also noting that we have mandatory monthly workshops that we are requiring funded partners to attend. So I see this question about the initiatives, can they already exist prior to this? Yes, the initiative can exist prior to the funding, but we want the project to be focused. When you're submitting the proposal needs to be focused on what you're going to do moving forward for the work. If you have additional questions, or if you have issues with completing your applications or any kind of technical assistance challenges, feel free to email us at compass@wfu.edu. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. All right, moving forward with the presentation, I just want to call attention to one of our silent partners that we have, which is ETR. As you all have probably picked up on the presentation, each organization, no matter what coordinating center you will apply through, will have to work with their Compass Coordinating Center around evaluation, as well as around assessment as it relates to their projects. In addition to that evaluation, there is a centralized evaluation, which will be which ETR serves as the evaluators to facilitate. And what the centralized evaluation is the evaluation across the entire Compass initiative, to include the direct giving that I was talking about earlier, the AgeView partnership. And with that being said, ETR will also be sending out an additional report, which will be quarterly for each one of the funded partners to actually complete as well. Also, I have put ETR's website right here on the slide, which is www.etr.org. So you all can look up the website and see who ETR is as well. So there is a very strong focus on evaluation throughout this process. And this is because our goal is to really identify what are the high impact and scalable and fundable interventions that are effective at reducing faith-based and HIV-related stigmas, and that are also effective at building the capacity of faith-based organizations to address HIV stigma through social media deterrence, and also the capability to replicate said programs throughout the South. And I will now turn this over to my colleague, Chris, to talk about the eligibility and the actual application process.
I actually have that section, Marcus.
Oh, sorry. This
You're
will be
fine. So just to tell you a little bit about our eligibility requirements. So applicants must be located in and provide services in one of the 12 southern states listed here. Applicants must be a nonprofit, tax exempt 501c3, or have the ability to obtain a fiscal sponsor. The grant period for this transformative grant process for all 4 coordinating campus centers is 18 months, beginning in June 2022 and ending by December 31st, 2023. So the award amount, I recommend everyone check the RFP for the specific CC that you're interested in applying for. But in general, there will be either a maximum amount of $100,000 or a maximum award amount of $115,000. It just depends on which CC you're applying to. All organizations who receive funding will need to complete an organizational survey and agree to work with our evaluation partner, ETR, as Marcus just mentioned. Next slide. So you may only submit one application for TGP funding. So please discuss with leadership at your organization what the current needs of your organization may be, and then submit an application for that specific focus area to that specific coordinating campus center. Next slide. And here is a list of unallowable activities. I won't read the entire list, but in general, projects that focus on or include PrEP, projects that are discriminatory in any way or do not represent the community being targeted are not allowed. Additionally, funding may not be used for activities that have already occurred, or funding may not be used to provide any sort of legal representation in civil or criminal cases. Next slide. One more time, I think, maybe. And I think this is you, Chris.
It's me. Thank you, dear. All right. I know what everyone is thinking in this moment. How do I get this money? Well, you have to submit an application. There you go. So first, I would suggest that you go online and look at the Transformative Grant application. Remember, read, and read again. Then you'll prepare responses and gather your required documents, and you'll submit an online application to the correct coordinating center, as Deasia just pointed out. Make sure that you read, and read again, so that you're making sure you're submitting your application to the most pertinent coordinating center for the work that you plan to do. Remember, we are all doing different work, or we've all got different focus areas. So make sure that the focus area you apply to is the one that will best fulfill the needs or be a good partner for you and your organization. Next slide, please. Submission requirements and deadlines. No applications via email, fax, mail, or express delivery without prior written request and approval. That means if you want to use something other than the system that we have set up for you to submit your grant application, which some may have some special needs, then please reach out to us at info@Gilead Campus so that we can support you as you move towards submitting that special application or support you in any of the special needs. They have to be in by Monday, April the 15th, 2022 by 11:59 Central Time. Remember, that's 11:59 Central Time. Say it with me one more time, Central Time. Submission deadline is Monday, May 2nd for all other applications, 2022 at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. Who knew? Central Time. Next slide, please. Lastly, your application components. Applications must include these 3 major sections: a project cover page, a project narrative, because you have to tell us exactly what you have to do, and some supplemental material. That may include a budget, it may include some more information around your 501c3. There are a litany of other things, and if you take a moment to glance below, you can see some of them. A diversity table, a list of your board of directors, maybe some MOAs or some letters of support or MOUs from other organizations. They may differ from center to center. Be on the lookout. That pulls us back to my first statement: read, 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 and then read again. I'll turn it over to my next presenter.
All right, that will be me again. I would like to remind everyone once again to read, read, read. That is very important as it relates to this RFP. Also, as it relates to the RFP, there's no surprises within the RFP. I would also want to call attention to all of my colleagues that are on the call around all the hard work that we put into the RFP. We really put a lot of thought into how we actually word things to make sure that it was accessible to our community. So we just actually really pay attention to what we're asking for within the RFP. And we promise you we will guide you to an excellent proposal. And once the proposals have been submitted, then the proposals will then go through the review process, which I will now outline. The review process will be an independent review process that will be comprised of individuals who are community members from each of the 12 eligible states. These individuals will either represent our programmatic areas, the priority populations in which we're serving, as well as individuals who have lived experience. These individuals will follow a rubric to score each application, and they will also meet as a collective to talk about each application scoring. They would then submit to each one of the coordinating centers a list of their top 10 organizations that they would suggest that will be funded. And then we as the organization will then follow that list around the recommendations that the community review board has submitted to us. So as it relates to important dates, all applications are due on May the 2nd. I just want to call attention again to that April 15th deadline. If you look through the application process and may need an alternative submission, the last date to contact us around that alternative submission will be on April 15th. There will be no accommodations after April 15th to be made around any alternative submissions. That information is also outlined within the RFP. Notice of funding decisions will go out to the funded organizations by June 11th. This will be an embargoed announcement, which means that the funded organizations are not to announce their status of being funded. Because there will be a public announcement that will come out sometime around June 27th in conjunction with the National HIV Testing Day. Once again, the grant periods have changed from 2 years ago. We were a 12-month cycle. We are now on an 18-month cycle, which means that these grant periods will begin June 2022 and end in December 2023. Right, with that, I will stop sharing my screen and I will turn things over to our moderator for our Q&A, which will be Kia for questions that were pre-submitted. If you all have any additional questions, you all feel free to put those in the chat box and Kia will try to get those questions answered as well. Please also know that we have an info box for you all to send questions that you all have to that space if you're not able to get those questions answered on this webinar as well. So I would now turn it over to Kia.
Thanks, Marcus. We have quite a few questions, and so I'm going to try to get through these questions. And so what I'll do is I will ask the questions out loud, and then I will open up the floor for the panelists to respond. Some of the questions will have one answer for all the coordinating centers, and then some of these answers will be dependent upon each coordinating center, and they can answer appropriately. The first question is grant writing assistance available?
As it relates for the University of Houston and most of the campus coordinating centers, now that the grants, the RFPs are out, we at the coordinating centers cannot provide capacity building to the organization as it relates to them actually applying for the funding. That would be a direct conflict of interest.
The next question is, can I apply for less than the maximum amount? The answer to that question is yes, of course. You can apply for less. We are awarding up to $100,000, and for some coordinating centers, and up to $115,000. So apply for what you need. The next question is, can I apply with a partnership with another organization?
Before we answer that question, Key, I want to go back to the first question. You all will not be able to get the capacity building grant writing for this cycle, but it may be a potential for you to get capacity assistance on another grant or for another cycle. So I would say if you know the coordinating center that you would like to apply for, to contact that center. Sorry.
Okay. That next question was, can I apply with a partnership with another organization?
Yes, you can apply in partnership with organizations. Our only ask is that the lead organization is an organization that is located and doing work in the South. And that organization should have either 501c3 designation or working with an organization that has 501c3 designation as their fiscal sponsor.
Awesome. Are we able to submit additional documents that will strengthen the proposal? And I'll open it up to each CC.
For the University of Houston, I will say that there would not be any additional documents that will strengthen your proposal. I would say pay very close attention to the questions that are being asked within the RFP and answer those to the best of your ability and submit whatever required documents that are asked.
For Wake Forest, I would say if you have letters of support from your partner organizations that can demonstrate that both of you all have discussed this project and you made the commitment to each other to do this work if it were to be funded, we would encourage those letters of support.
Oh, no, go ahead, DH. After you.
For the Southern AIDS Coalition, we will not be accepting any additional documentation.
And for the Emory Campus Coordinating Center, you may submit anything you like, but they may not be accounted for in the rubric. We will only be accounting for the things in the rubric that we have asked for. So it will get you no additional points.
Thank you. The next question, is there hands-on help for first-time organizations that are submitting to Transformative Grant?
There will not be any hands-on assistance to submit applications, but there will be lots of hands-on assistance for organizations who are selected, being that these are capacity building grants.
So I'm not sure, are they saying like hands-on for writing the grant or hands-on for like submitting through the platform?
It was pre-submitted question, so I'm not sure what the intention was.
With Wake Forest, we encourage you, if you have questions or you need some clarification or you need some feedback, email us, campus@wfu.edu. We won't be reviewing the proposals ahead of time, but we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Are organizations who operate in but do not have a physical office space in the 12 states be eligible to apply?
Organizations who are not located in the 12 states are not eligible to apply. However, if they are working with an organization that is located in in one of the 12 states, they are allowed to partner with them. However, that organization will have to be the lead as it relates to applying for this funding.
Thank you. Next question, what makes a strong application? What are some transformative stigma projects that have been successful?
So I can take that one. So strong applications are going to be those that represent the community, are led by the community, have a board that is comprised of the community, those that have the meaningful involvement of people living with HIV. As far as grants that have been successfully funded, those that are clearly defined and detailed with appropriate SMART goals, clear objectives, and a solid evaluation plans. Those are things we look at very closely and we take into consideration. So I would definitely emphasize having those SMART goals and having a clearly defined evaluation plan.
Thank you. Can these funds be used to buy incentives?
The short of that answer is yes. But I would contact if you know what that would look like, I would contact the CC prior to get that authorization. It depends on what that incentive is, as well as it depends on liable costs as well. So short of the answer is yes, that is a possibility, but contact the CC around what that would look like or what that possibly could look like.
The next question is, what is the maximum allowed indirect cost rate we may request?
I think that will vary by the coordinating centers for the University of Houston. As it relates to the budget template is already completed and it has an indirect cost of 10% of the total budget. I mean, excuse me, less than 10% of the total budget.
The Emory Campus Coordinating Center will join you in that. We will not be giving you an indirect cost of more than 10%.
And that is the case for the Southern AIDS Coalition as well.
And Wake Forest.
Can you apply again if you are a current transformative grantee?
So that will also depend on the coordinating center. There is a question within the application that asks if you are a current partner of the Compass Initiative, and it also asks you to outline which opportunity you are currently a part of, as well as to outline a detailed plan or a plan around how you plan to manage or what capacity you have to manage both projects at the same time. That is the general rule. However, I think that may vary from coordinating.
I misspoke earlier. We're deferring to that rule.
Okay. So short of the answer is yes, you can apply. However, you would have to justify your ability to actually carry out both projects.
Next question, is there capacity building assistance to help bridge the digital divide with small CBOs such as IT infrastructure?
That would be us, yes. The answer would be yes, absolutely. If you want to work on the technology infrastructure of your organization, feel free to apply to the Emory Campus Coordinating Center, where infrastructure is our zhuzh.
I just want to jump in. I think, because I know that some of our funded or the people who are interested in our funding opportunities are new to Compass and are not familiar with the structure. And I just want to make it clear that each one of these coordinating centers has their own grant opportunities. And so you would need to, if you want to apply to Wake Forest for a faith-based grant, you have to select Wake Forest. And then we have different questions and different criteria and different reviewers for each coordinating center. So just because I noticed last year that some people submitted to the wrong coordinating center, even though they were applying to us and vice versa. So just make sure that you're very clear that you're indicating which coordinating center you're applying to when you're going to the portal.
Thank you. With the TA capacity building grants, what are the approximate time commitments that are anticipated for any learning or training opportunity?
That question would differ from coordinating center. I can speak for the University of Houston. For the University of Houston, it will be an extensive program. I would say about 100 to 150 hours will have to be dedicated to this project within the first 6 months. The first 6 months is a very intensive training program with our excellent consultants, Ribbon Consultants, around getting a great foundation around what trauma-informed care is, as well as what trauma-informed approaches or needs are within your organization. So it will be an extensive time commitment where we are requiring at least one FTE on this project.
For Emory University, that time frame is a little bit smaller and not as intensive, but there is still an amount of intensive work as we review your work plans and your budgets to make sure that they meet the outcomes for your project. So at least for the first 2 months we'll say the first 2 to 3 months of your organizational time will be spent updating and making change and being coached through your work plan and your objectives. And then there will be some work on the back end as we work to evaluate you and support you as you move through sustainability.
For the Southern AIDS Coalition, that time commitment is a little bit more spread out. You know, during the 18-month grant period, we do require you to attend some trainings. There'll be a site visit. There'll be quite a few trainings that you will have to attend, but it doesn't rise to the level of what is required by my colleagues at the University of Houston.
For Wake Forest, we're requiring you to attend our monthly workshops. There'll be a few times maybe where it's like every 2 weeks, but for the most part, it will be once a month workshops, and then a requirement to submit the quarterly reports that requires evaluation data. So, you know, I think the time commitment is really focused on the workshops and then making sure that you're getting data and organizing the data for the quarterly report. So
yeah, and within the RFP, there is also each one of our colleagues really outline the commitment that will be needed in order to carry out this process. So in the words of Christopher, read, it's all there.
Thank you. The next question is, can the idea or project be completed prior to the dates listed? So I'm assuming they mean, can they finish the project early before December 2023?
For the University of Houston, it wouldn't be possible.
So for Wake Forest, and I think this was a question for someone who's going to apply to our grant. So the structure of our funding is that we want to work with organizations that have projects that are at least 12 months long. And of course, since this is an 18-month project, so we anticipate that there'll be some planning time to get your projects off the ground. And then we're also anticipating that there'll be some wrap-up time where you're pulling data together, doing reporting and that kind of thing. So I would plan for at least 12 months for your project implementation, and then include some buffer time for planning and wrap-up.
For the Southern AIDS Coalition, it is our intention to fund applications that can be completed within 18 months. If you are completing your project significantly earlier than that 18 months, I don't think that will be allowable for us. We're looking for projects that are still kind of in the early stages where they're either being created or adapted, or they're being expanded. So if it's something that's going to be done within 6 months, or if it's something that has already occurred, we would not be funding those types of applications.
For the Emory Conference Coordinating Center, we don't mind if you get her done. Because we're doing infrastructure items for your organization, if you have a technology upgrade that only takes 6 months to implement, like you want to implement some kind of new technology package, we're not gonna, because of the nature of the work, we're not gonna ask you to stretch it out for any additional months, because that may be the only amount of time you need to make this particular thing happen. So no, your project doesn't have to meet the timeline of the full 18 months, but we do hope that you vet out the project well and take as much time as you need in those 18 months to successfully meet the outcomes, because we are very outcomes driven here. Thank you.
All right. Can I be a fiscal agent for an organization and apply for one of the grants for my organization?
Yeah, for the University of Houston, there's no stipulations around that. However, I would just caution that organizations have memorandums of understanding and agreements in place, because I can speak for the University of Houston, we will not be intervening in any of those contractual disputes, if there are any.
And that's the same for the Southern AIDS Coalition.
And I will also remind everybody who is looking for a shorter project period that all the CCs across the board have some smaller grants. And so maybe your small project may be better. It may be easier for you to apply for a smaller grant from one of the CCs, or a smaller funding opportunity if you have some light work that you want to take care of. Just FYI.
Okay. Are we able to modify the work plan, and how many pages at max?
So so is this pre-submission or once selected?
It was written in the chat. This is a question from the chat.
So I can speak for the University of Houston. We do not require a work plan. What we require is a work plan narrative. However, that work plan narrative will be fleshed out with us, so it will change. Short of answer, yes, there's opportunity to change the work plan once submitted.
Yes, with the Southern AIDS Coalition, you are able to revise your work plan, and I do not believe we have any page length requirements, but please refer to the RFP for those details.
Thank you. Are you interested in funding young organizations with an organizational budget of $200,000 or less? Is there a certain budget range you would like organizations to fall within?
That is a great question. As it relates to budget requirement, organizational budget requirements, we do not have a requirement that a budget has, that an organization has an organizational budget of a certain amount. We do have requirements that the organization be fiscally responsible for said money. So we will say if the organization has the capacity to actually handle such a significant increase in their budget, that we will not disregard working with the organization, because this may be their first grant or project that may significantly overshadow any other grants that they have had. So the long of the short of it is there's no organizational budgetary requirements. However, we just ask that you all understand and know what the fiscal requirements will be to spend down that money.
And the Southern AIDS Coalition, we do prioritize applications from organizations with budgets less than $1 million. but we will accept applications from organizations with budgets of all sizes.
We don't have a limit on the budget, operating budget for organizations.
At the Emory Campus Coordinating Center, we strongly work towards supporting what we call emerging organizations. So we do look to organizations that are looking to stabilize themselves or working to stabilize themselves. So we do focus more on small organizations with smaller budgets.
Thank you. Is there a percentage you all like for evaluation of the project?
I'm not understanding the question. You say, is there a percentage that we would like for evaluation?
Yes, I'm assuming they are asking for evaluation of the project, the evaluation portion. Is there a percentage of the proposal that you want to be evaluation?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry.
Go
I
ahead,
was going to say, at Emory, we're not looking for a specific number that is allocated to the evaluation of your project, but in your work plan, we are looking to make sure that your evaluative efforts are apparent in your work plan and how you plan to evaluate the project. We also will provide you some evaluation support and technical assistance should you be awarded funding from.
I think for Wake Forest, it's more of a, we want you to be prepared, knowing that we are going to be asking you to evaluate your programs. We will be providing the surveys that you can use to evaluate your programs. We just want you to have that as a part of your plan and know that there should be someone in your organization who is committed to making sure that the surveys are completed for the evaluation.
Same for the University of Houston. We will provide the evaluative tools. We just ask that you all provide the manpower and capacity to actually have those tools completed.
And for the Southern AIDS Coalition, we do not have a specific percentage requirement, but we are looking for solid evaluation plans. So that means that it's been flushed out, it's been talked about, it makes sense, it's specific. But we will be also providing evaluators to all, evaluation support to all of our recipients if you are awarded the TGP grant.
Thank you. Next question. We're getting to the end of the list. Do you fund projects 100% or do we have to have other funders as well?
So we fund projects at our maximum. So if the project is $100,000 to complete, we will fund that project, or $115,000 depending on the coordinating center. Then we will fund it at $115,000, which is the max potentially. But if the projects are over our maximum, you will need to seek additional funding to have the full project funded.
Thank you. Will we need to incorporate a meeting cost like the previous transformative grant applications?
At the current, no, there's no current meeting costs holding for transformative grant this cycle.
There's no holding, but we do have a lot of potential conferences and other potential opportunities for travel. So I would encourage you to have some funding allocated for travel.
Okay. How many grants are being given out at each CC or total funds available?
The University of Houston will be awarded 5 grants.
For Wake Forest, it depends on, we're releasing all of our funding opportunities at the same time. And so we're kind of making decisions about funding with the consideration of all of the applicants and the funding opportunities. We would like to fund 5 transformative grantees, but there's no guarantees that all 5 will be funded.
Yeah, I would like to make a revision. We will fund up to 5, up to 5.
So for the Southern AIDS Coalition, it will be based on the budget that is allotted for transformative grants, but we typically average around 8 transformative grants that we typically fund.
We will be somewhere between the 7 to 10 grant mark. So it just depends on the amount of grantees that we have. And it also depends on the level of work and how much additional support we want to provide those grantees.
I want to jump in and also say with Wake Forest, we really encourage you to submit a budget at 100,000. Don't go in under that. Just go for the money, go for the 100,000 and make sure that you're asking for what you need.
Okay. Would the coordinating centers be available to talk through which center is most appropriate if there is overlap of where a group could apply to?
That's kind of a tricky question. I would say the short of that answer is no. If you have specific questions as it relates to the application process or specific questions as it relates to the content areas of the coordinating centers, I would encourage you to reach out to the coordinating centers. However, the coordinating centers being able to give specific information around which coordinating center you should apply to would also be a direct conflict of interest, or could be a perceived direct conflict of interest.
Okay. And our last question, can you work on 2 different grants and submit your own? So meaning, for example, if an organization is working with a faith organization, a HIV organization is working with a faith organization, can they be submitted as a part of that grant and also submit a grant for their own organization?
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah, the short of the answer is yes, but I will also ask once again within that question on the application, outline the capacity to actually carry out both.
Yeah, because
project.
we're going to be reviewing both applications, and we all have conversation between the coordinating center. So we'll know if you apply to multiple opportunities, and you need to make it clear that you can handle both funding opportunities.
Transparency is the key. So if you know that you are also, if you're a lead and you're applying for a grant, and you also know that you're support on another grant, make sure you just outline that in the RFP and outline the your capacity to actually carry out both grants deliverables.
Okay, thank you. That is all of the questions. If you have any lingering questions, we have about 1 minute left. You can go ahead and put it in the chat, and I will turn it over back to Marcus so that he can close us out.
All right, thank you. Chris, I see your hand up. See your church link.
Marcus, I just put in the chat, even though we can't do too much of telling you what to do for our grant applications, besides the fact that you should read, and read again. We are going to have a webinar where we talk about the top 10 grant writing mistakes. So just a little bit of pre-TA to help support you as you go along, things not to do. So if you check the chat box, you can see that there is a webinar coming up for grant writing mistakes. So I would suggest you take a look at it, because we will be grading pretty diligently at each CC. That's the thought.
Thank you, Chris. All right. We also have each one of our contact information if you have specific questions for each one of the CCs on this slide, as well as this is the general information. To apply for these grants, you will go to www.gileadcompass.com and you will click the Apply Now button, and then you will click the specific coordinating center in which you would like to apply. I would encourage you all to download the application and complete those questions before actually trying to submit it into the actual portal. You can follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. What is that? What is this yellow IN? I don't know.
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, I thought it was blue, and LinkedIn. Also, if you have any additional questions, feel free to email the questions at info@gileadcompass.com. And with that, we are 1 minute over. I encourage you all, if your questions was not answered today, to either reach out to this info@gileadcompass.com or to the actual specific coordinating centers. Thank you to the presenters for presenting with me, as well as everyone that helped to make this space come to fruition. Thank you to Kia for being our question and answer moderator, and Candace for your assistance with the recording. And with that, thank you all and have a great rest of your day, unless any of my colleagues have anything to say.
No, thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.